What a difference a season can make. That's something you could always say about the NFL, and that definitely holds true for the 2013 New Orleans Saints. In 2012, you had the whole stigma and blow off or blowout, if you will, from the Bounty Gate scandal. Sean Payton was suspended the entire year. Their defense was historically bad. It put too much pressure on Drew Brees and that New Orleans Saints offense, and they had a bad year. Missed the playoffs and ended up picking in the middle of the first round. Like I said, 2013 was an entirely different story, and the Saints surprised me a little bit. I underestimated them before the season, and that was my mistake. I shouldn't have. Because, man, it made some strides, made some big improvements, and ended up making a good season out of it. They ended up going 11-5, which most years is good enough to win a division, but this year it wasn't. They were the division leaders in the NFC South for most of the season, but they finished second in the division, made the playoffs, and not only won a playoff game, but won a playoff game on the road in Philadelphia before going to Seattle and losing in the divisional round, where they still made it a game and they still made it very interesting. You know, a lot of credit goes to Sean Payton, Rob Ryan, Drew Brees, and that entire Saints organization for really turning things around in 2013. When you look at the Saints, their identity ultimately is Drew Brees, beyond question. And for many years, I always thought it was going to be Reggie White was the greatest free agent signing of all time, and nobody was ever going to measure up to that. But Drew Brees has now clearly surpassed that, which is truly saying something. He is the greatest free agent signing in NFL history and has become a first ballot Hall of Famer in my mind. And just year after year after year, puts up monster numbers. Another season of over 5,000 passing yards, 39 touchdown passes. With all the passes he throws, only 12 interceptions. That's incredible. I mean, Drew Brees is special. And I think sometimes with all the focus on the Peyton Mannings and the Tom Bradys, that Brees gets lost in the shuffle a little bit. And some of you might say, well, not with all the commercials it gets and all this. Yeah, but really think about it. He doesn't get that same level of respect that a Peyton Manning or a Tom Brady does. And frankly, he's won just as many Super Bowls as Peyton Manning. And he's won a Super Bowl much more recently than Tom Brady. And he has more 5,000-yard passing seasons than both Peyton Manning and Tom Brady. The guy's incredible. That's the best way I could put it. And we could talk about the different weapons that he has on offense, but when you look at it from an offensive standpoint, their offensive line still struggled to protect him at times in 2013. It wasn't nearly as bad as it was in 2012, but there were still times where they struggled to protect him, especially on the blind side. And that's something long term they're going to have to get figured out because Brees only has a certain amount of time left in the NFL. And he's going to be the guy you ride with until the wheels fall off him. As a result, you have to do everything you can to protect him because it's not like he's a big, nimble, mobile athlete or anything like that. You look at the Saints running game. They have this big committee of running backs that to me amounts to a whole lot of squat between the Pierre Thomases and the Mark Ingrams and the Darren Sproles. The bottom line is that they lack an identity, I feel like, in the running game. They get too enamored with having all of these running backs to where they really don't have one. And that's something I feel like at times really hurts this football team and really hurts the Saints offense. Now, in the passing game, people will talk about the plethora of weapons he has to work with, but when you look at the numbers, it kind of shows you that Drew Brees does a phenomenal job of spreading the ball around because he only had one 1,000-yard receiver this year, and that was Jimmy Graham. You have guys like DeMarcus Colston, Kenny Stills, the fifth-round pick, had a nice rookie year. Lance Moore came back from injury, and he had some nice moments, but nothing special. I think people sometimes maybe frankly overrate the weapons that the Saints have in the passing game. Maybe it's a testament and a credit again to just how good Drew Brees truly is. It's going to be interesting to see this offseason with Jimmy Graham being an unrestricted free agent. Are they going to sit there with Jimmy Graham and franchise him? Are they going to try and franchise him as a tight end? Or are they going to give him what he wants, which is a franchise tag either as a wide receiver or a long-term deal treating him as a wide receiver since he lines up outside 3/4 of the time? And it's going to be very interesting to see what the Saints do with Jimmy Graham and see how that works out and see if there ends up being a lot of animosity and anger between both sides in this offseason. Is it going to be a bit of an on and off the field distraction in 2014 for the New Orleans Saints? Jimmy Graham is probably the best tight end in the National Football League, at least as a pass receiver. Even with the at times being eliminated by whether it be the Patriots or the Seahawks in the playoffs, the man still produces and still puts up big numbers. Now he needs to learn how to be able to contribute and put up some big numbers in big time spots against big time opponents. I'll grant you that. But the dude's a beast, and the Saints have to do everything they can to break the bank and make sure they keep this guy happy. Now, defensively, the story of this organization, frankly, this year was the job that Rob Ryan did with the Saints defense, flipping them to a 3-4 and getting a hell of a lot more out of them. You think Jerry Jones feels like an idiot for firing this guy now? He should, because Jerry Jones is an idiot when it comes to the football side of things. The Saints defense was not elite, but they played at a much higher level. They played at a level that helped the Saints be a contender all year long, that helped the Saints make the playoffs, that helped the Saints win a playoff game. And that's what they needed to do. You don't have to have a top 10 dominant defense to win a championship in New Orleans as long as you have Drew Brees in that offense. But you got to be able at times to make stops. You got to be able at times to make plays. You got to be able at times to be able to generate a pass rush against opposing quarterbacks. And the Saints did that. Cameron Jordan and Junior Galette both had 12-plus sack seasons, which is very impressive, especially from Cameron Jordan. I think that guy's a little bit underrated. Kenny Vaccaro, the first-round pick at safety, had a really nice year. It was a shame to see him go down at the end of the season with an injury because he definitely was a big-time difference maker in that defensive backfield for the Saints. The bottom line is that as long as the Saints have Drew Brees, they always have a chance. And you saw more of what the Saints can be in 2013 compared to what they did in 2012, which you kind of consider an aberration or a fluke. I mean, when you really think about it, you've still got Drew Brees. Sean Payton is a hell of a football coach, and you see the type of impact that he made in 2013. And Rob Ryan, without having a lot of great pieces to be able to implement and run that 3-4, got the most out of that defensive unit he possibly could. Things look good in New Orleans right now. I wouldn't book them as going to Super Bowl 49 just yet, but things look good where you would expect them to be playoff contenders and be in the playoff race all year next season. In this offseason, the Saints do need to address some things. I do think on the offensive side of the football, they can't totally ignore that side. They could use another wide receiver because Marcus Colston's not getting any younger. And other than him, they really don't have a truly consistent, reliable possession receiver on the outside. That's something I think that they do need to address. They got to take care of the Jimmy Graham situation. I think they still need to beef up their offensive line. You've got to protect Drew Brees. I still think they could use yet another running back, find a running back in the third or fourth round that could potentially become that every down feature back that they just flat out lack in New Orleans right now. On the defensive side of the ball, you're going to run the 3-4. You have to have outside linebackers that can generate a pass rush. Their linebacking core as a whole, I feel, is a relative weakness of that defensive unit and needs to be addressed probably with 2 picks in the first 4 rounds, and they could use another pick or 2 at cornerback. So they are a team with needs, but my hat's off to the Saints. They rebounded nicely in 2013 and had a very good season ultimately.